and the destruction of democracy in little pieces, a bite here, a bite there, until you normalize tyranny. And that's what's really scary, that we're heading in a direction that we really need to reverse course on.
Hello, and welcome to Nosotros, the podcast about San Antonio history, politics, cultura y más, brought to you in part by the Gomez Law Firm. I'm Elaine Ayala, Metro columnist for the Express News, and I'm your host. My guest today is longtime political activist Rosie Castro. Some of you may know her best as one of the leaders of the Raza Unida movement, or for finally getting to serve on city council. There's a lot of history there, Rosie. Others may know you best because you're the mother of two favorite sons of San Antonio, U.S. Congressman Joaquin Castro and former Mayor and Housing Secretary Julian Castro, and now CEO of the California-based Latino Community Foundation, the largest foundation of its kind in the United States. Are you successful or what?
Well, I think they're very successful. And I'm a very proud parent, as many parents are. It's always wonderful to see your children. And I'm hoping to live long enough to see the grandchildren go on to college and to do things that, they want to do. That will be helpful in this world.
Mm-hmm. I hope so, too. We need you around. One of the things that people may not know about you is that you write poetry. And I want you to talk about how long you've been doing that and what drives that before you share a little bit of it.
Well, I think that writing poetry and reciting poetry is really a Mexican, one of the things that goes way back into our history, probably comes from passing on oral language, oral traditions. Mm-hmm. But I think I started doing that since I was in elementary school. I've always loved poetry. And I found that as I grew older, particularly in college and during my career, it was a great escape. I would spend nights writing poems and being lost in that creative process. And that was fun for me. Now, what is weird is that in my older age, I don't write as much anymore. I don't know if that's due to, we blame now social media and, everything you read is not a book. It's small little things on your computer. Mm-hmm. So I've gotten away from writing it a lot. What I do is I think it and I don't put it down on paper. So if I don't put it down on paper, it's gone.
Does it just come in a burst of an idea? Is it tied to feeling? Is it tied to events?
I think that, it's several things. One, when I look back at what I've written, much of it is written to a person. And that, I think, is because it's easier to put on paper what you want to say, at least for me, than to be able to say, hey, Elaine, this is what I want to say. Mm-hmm. So for me, putting words down on paper were the way to be able to tell somebody something. I think it's also, many people have said, and I think it's true, you're exploring your own emotions, you're exploring what you think. Sometimes something happens and, right away you're not quite understanding it. So there's something that percolates inside your mind and you're trying to figure out, what is this all about? So that's part of it too. But for me, like I said, much of it was escape, looking outside of the world as it was and being able to write something that made me feel good. It was never really written for an audience. And as a matter of fact, I've always been very, very afraid of reading. So I love to watch people like Sandra Cisneros. I can stand there and
she's a performer. She's a performer.
Yes, because I'm not known to be shy. I was as a kid, but but I can't. It's very hard for me to stand there and recite poetry.
And it's so emotional.
Yes.
So I'm going to beg your forgiveness and ask you to read something that you wrote. Tell us when you wrote it, why you wrote it. By the way, how early did you start writing poetry?
Probably in elementary school. That's when I first discovered folks. Of course, you know, when you're in elementary school, you're not learning anything about Chicano poets. You're learning the classics, so-called, the Western literature. But what my favorite poet was Edgar Allan Poe. And part of it was because they criticized him so much. Walt Whitman called him names. Other people did too. And yet today he's looked at as the father of the modern mystery and detective novel. Mm-hmm. He wrote short stories. He wrote plays. He wrote poetry. But I guess in a way, I felt an attraction to this man who was so misunderstood and was such a genius at the time, and not totally recognized at that. Now, granted, he had his faults, but one of the thrills that I had, a friend and I were in Baltimore some years back, and I went to see his two graves. He was buried twice. So I loved Poe, and I think back in third or fourth grade, you know, I found myself starting to write. And in high school, people would ask me, will you write a poem for this girlfriend of mine or this boyfriend of mine? So I would do that. And I published a few in the high school newspaper and in the college newspaper at Our Lady of the Lake.
So will you read something?
Sure. I'm going to read something that has been published in a couple of different places, and it is a poem about an election, of course.
Tell us where it was published.
And it was published in a book done by Inez Hernandez Avila and Norma Cantu, who is here at Trinity. Mm-hmm. It's called Entre Guadalupe y Malinche.
Oh, I have that one.
Tejanas in Literature and Art. So I've got 4 poems there. And what I really liked about that, too, was Enedina Cáceres Vázquez, who has also passed away. She had a lot of poems in this book, too. And it took about 10 or 15 years before the book was published. So we always used to joke about, is it ever going to be published? But here it is. It's called San Antonio Sin Marias.
Sin Marias.
Downtown San Antonio street walks, 1950s, shoulder to shoulder, column on column, vatos and flyboys staring you down, whispering or shouting, Maria. To the sailor and the soldiers, we were all Maria. Even city supervisors, inferno noon sun pouring down ever-present ditches, stop pick and jack action long enough to whistle, ay, mamacita, Maria. To the banker and the tourist, we were all Maria. Ladies, Cadillac driven from north side forts to downtown, shopping for charity gala finery at the Houston Street Frost. Let me see this one. No, that one, Maria. To the teachers and the preachers, to the dentist and the doctors, to the lawyers and the judges, we were all Maria. Maria, no last name. Maria, no history. Maria, no feelings. Maria, no identity. Then in 1991, colossal billboards, white on blue, arrested their vision. Maria for mayor. And that was simply one too many Marias.
Oh, good kicker. And that was in reference to Maria Antonieta Berriozabal, right, whose historic run for mayor is studied now in history and political science departments because she got 3 points from beating Nelson Wolff.
Oh, yeah. And
so close.
It was a campaign that I worked on, and of course, Antonieta has always been a great friend. And I think, you know, the thing is that we're still waiting for our first Mexican-American woman to be mayor of this city.
Yes, ma'am.
And I hope that it happens during my lifetime anyway.
Yes, both of us.
Yeah.
One of the touch points in your story was about your education at Little Flower.
Yep.
And I always found it so interesting that both you and Henry Cisneros were students at Little Flower at the same time.
Right.
And that your political activism would take you in I don't know if it's opposite directions, but definitely different directions.
Sure.
He was part of the Good Government League at the early part of his life. He was a Democrat in Texas, especially at that time, was really Republican-like. Some would say that still is true. And you certainly were part of the Raza Unida, the Chicano movement that was, right with all of those people and all of those movements, like the local, it's skipping my brain, Metro
Cops.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about that early beginning, you and Henry Cisneros at Little Flower at the same time. Were you in the same grade?
Yes, we were. He likes to say we were in kinder, but I never went to kinder. I started in first grade. And the thing about Henry that I've always remembered is that by 8th grade, he was gone. He had skipped grades. He was, you could tell very early on the guy was totally intelligent. And he went on to Central Catholic, I think. So we've been friends over the years forever. He's always been very supportive of my sons.
Absolutely.
And I've tried to be supportive of the things he's doing. His arboretorium or whatever the tree thing is called.
Arboretum.
I'm very.
But I like arboretorium a lot.
Whatever it is. The trees. I was kidding that, Henry's become a tree hugger.
Yeah, he really has.
I really love the idea that he's doing that because we know from several studies that the tree canopy is lacking in many parts of San Antonio. And I think that's going to be a way to appreciate those living trees that are giving us cleaning the oxygen and giving us some pure air. So there's many things that he has done throughout his lifetime that I'm sure the sisters, like Sister Gabriela, who was principal later on at Little Flower, really feel very proud about the education that they gave to Henry and to many others at Little Flower.
There's so many major milestones in your life that historians and journalists look back on. That you stayed at Little Flower all of those years, then went to Our Lady of the Lake and became very politically active there. I know you told a story many times about how you not only worked for establishment of a Democratic group on campus, but a Republican one too. So what do you consider some of your major milestones in life?
Well, I think besides my sons, I think that over the years, I've had an opportunity to work with a lot of very talented people on projects that we hoped would serve the community. First of all, there's the whole political arena of not only Raza Unida, but years after with folks like Maria Antonieta. I now do a lot of work or try with particularly Latina women. And also in my professional life, I've had the opportunity to make sure that kids got scholarships, that they got jobs out of college, that they found mentors, and also was able to work when I worked with Annie Casey Foundation, was able to help to set up the West Side Education and Training Center. We actually facilitated, several of us, the building of that, the community coming together to build that. And that's kind of what I like, working in community where you're able to build the kinds of things, whether they're physical or whether they're social service or whether it's poetry, arts, the ability to give beauty to the community, the ability to give hope, the ability to work with folks that will create the kinds of policies that are needed for our communities. That's what excites me, and that's what I hope that, that will be part of a legacy. I think along with that, there's a lot of things that I did in the early years that I often never talk about. I did a lot of work with looking at what police the police actions that were taken during the 70s against Mexican Americans. Because as you know, in Dallas, we had had the shooting of the 12-year-old boy by the police that were playing with the gun and playing the Russian roulette with a 12-year-old boy in Dallas. In San Antonio, near Hays County, we had the Mireles case where several of us went and met with the Justice Department and talked to them about how we needed to stop these killings. And finally, the Justice Department went ahead and used the civil rights legislation to prosecute that sheriff that had killed Mireles in Hays County and to prosecute his wife and her sister who had buried them in another county. So for many years, those Raza Unida years were not just Raza Unida, but were working in the fields that I felt there were a lot of deficiencies, that there were a lot of problems, that there were a lot of bias and prejudice against, in areas where I felt strongly that we needed to take action. As opposed to, and that's always been the problem with me in terms of poetry. In college, I looked at poetry, I took the courses, I still do sometimes, but I looked at that as something that was not going to be able to get things done. I think that's an erroneous view because you can see many poets that make a big difference. But I finally came to the conclusion that politics, rather than poetry, was going to be the way to go, because there you could make changes in people's life by affecting who was elected and what policies they would institute. And of course, in college, the big thing was, trying to get people just registered to vote. And I was very fortunate to know Willie Velasquez and all of those folks that worked.
Tell us a story about Willie.
Willie was a great friend. I guess one of the saddest things I remember was that close to the end, he never complained about being ill or anything. But if you remember when the Alamo Draft House came into town, one of the first things they were going to show was the Alamo. And the Alamo, as we saw clips of it, was presenting Latina women as prostitutes. First of all, it's a myth, the way it's told, the story is told. But then it was making it worse by making it look as though we were all these lazy, no good for nothing, people. And so we marched around that. And I didn't have a car at the time, so Willie would pick me up from wherever I was working or whatever I was doing, and we'd ride together to the meetings and stuff. Willie had been there since the days of the Karams meetings, and those were meetings that liberals used to hold at Karams, which is no longer there.
It breaks my heart.
Me too. Every Friday we would meet, and labor, African American, Latino, and Anglo liberals, which at that time were few, but Willie was one of those very strong voices then, and always has been. I think that he sacrificed a great deal, and it's really great to see his children do so well today, because it was, I can remember, in the hospital when he had cancer, and the little one, his son, Guillermo, was very small. Guillermo didn't want to leave his side. And it was heartbreaking to see, Janie have to get him to leave. So
that's beautiful.
For me, Willie was, really an incredible force. But there have been a lot of people like that, including folks that are never really recognized, people like Ruben Sandoval, like Irma Mireles, and many others.
And so many of the people that were part of Raza Unida have either passed or are pretty elderly.
Yes.
And you're still out there. Thank you. You're still out there at a lot of events. Your presence, by the way, is all that we need sometimes. Just you being there at a meeting makes a difference. So give a shout out a little bit to those people that you most remember I'm thinking of Mario Compian. I know he's not well.
And of course, Mario's still, around. He just did a fundraiser for the group that he started that works with immigrants, Academia America. And then there's the folks that passed away, like Jose Montalvo, who is known as the Black Hat Poet, Ramon Vasquez y Sanchez, who, was one of the founders of Aztlan, Centro Aztlan. There's been many folks that died early from Raza Unida, and many that have, like I said, not been written about. So right now in my bedroom, I have a picture of several of us. It was a friend of mine in Raza Unida, gave me a picture of several of them. And the sad thing is to watch it now, because out of the group of maybe 10, 12 people, 3 of them have passed away.
Yes.
And so, we're at an age where, you're watching friends pass away. And so you learn to try to really cherish the moment and to spend some quality time with people, your family, but also your friends. And I'm very fortunate that over the years, I've had great friends like Maria Antonieta Berrio Zaval, besides the Raza Unida group, Sister Yolanda Tarango, who is a founder of Visitation House, Bambi Cardenas,
who is a force of nature. I'm going to try to get her on sometime.
Oh, that would be great. She is incredible. I mean, and she did so much. Even work, sitting on that Civil Rights Commission, Barbara Aguirre, just so many people over the years that have contributed a great deal to the community. And not the way, we honor those that give money for some reason. I understand that, but it's great when you're able to see a building or a street or something named for those people that contributed in their way to the community. This year, MACRI, the Mexican American Civil Rights Institute, really did a great job with Idar, and has brought her story to life. And I hear a lot more people talking about what she did. And what she did was incredible, even to the point of, towards the end of her life, going and working with people with tuberculosis and finally getting tuberculosis. I mean, she gave her all.
Yeah.
And look at all the years that it was buried. So I really see folks like Macri are going to be able to bring those things to light. This Saturday, they're going to have a session on Paredes, Americo Paredes, who, it's not Americo.
Alonso Perales.
Perales. And he was an incredible force, not only in LULAC, but the kinds of things this guy did.
Way ahead of his time.
Yes.
I think the Mexican American Civil Rights Institute, though very young, is already making such a major contribution, and I love that they've already got architectural plans for a dream museum that I don't think they even have land for yet. But that's the kind of dreaming I love to see in San Antonio.
Absolutely.
We're facing so many issues and fighting so many issues that Raza Unida fought.
Yes.
That Democrats, 4 generations ago were fighting for. And I want to hear your mindset as new generations of activists take on things like voting rights, civil rights, the work of the Supreme Court in ensuring body autonomy and not coming to that defense.
Right.
So looking back on all the work that all of you did, tell me what you're thinking about what we're facing now.
Well, the work is continuous with every generation, and that's the great thing that you see young people taking that baton that Julian talks about and running with it. And that's great to see, because this is, like you mentioned, very much like the old days, the bad old days, in terms of the policies that we're now seeing that we would never believe would come back.
Yes.
The idea of a woman not being able to control her own body is just foreign. To me, it's incredible. We talk about Mexico, a third world people. People want to say the third world country. They just elected a woman president. When are we going to do that? I thought I was going to get to see it in my lifetime. Now I'm not so sure. When are we going to come out of this depression of hating people, of making people fear the immigrant, making people fear women, making people fear transgender or folks that are homosexual, that are different? When are we going to finally say, look, that doesn't, what matters is that, we're put on this earth, I think, to make life better, to love one another, to find a good way. And we all must make mistakes. I know I have. But when I look at today, and every legislative session, there's new terrors. Somebody wants to, ban something. Somebody wants to not allow medical treatment for transgender kids. People want vouchers to stomp out the public school system.
They don't want public school systems.
And that's incredible. The public school system was something that the United States, was so proud of having invented and fostered. And now we're at a place where, it's like the Twilight Zone. Mm-hmm. We're at a place where there are people that matter, that are making policy, that are putting these things upon us that you just cannot believe are happening. And so what's difficult is to find a way to fight back. And to me, it's always been one answer, and that is, in a democracy, the way you fight back is that you register, you vote, you run for office, you elect people that create the policies for the common good. We can't forget the common good, not the, any group good, every group good.
Yeah. And education, public education.
Yes.
Not going into debt for the rest of your life if you seek higher education.
Absolutely.
It's really very simple. It's roads, it's safety, it's health care.
The ability to vote, the health care. I just saw an article recently that we were looked at as a city that was not very well run. And one of the things that was said was that two issues, and healthcare was one of the big ones that they looked at. Earlier we were chatting about dementia and Alzheimer's. In our communities, they devastate our communities.
Oh, yes.
Diabetes, kidney disease.
And they're related. Diabetes is related to dementia.
Yes. And those are the issues we should be fighting on.
As a state.
But
what do? We limit the expansion of Medicaid for children that are being diagnosed with diabetes at 5th grade.
And this summer, you can believe that the governor of Texas did not allow for the money for lunches, for school lunches for kids. That's incredible. How can you do that to children? I just don't understand how far out we have gotten in terms of not caring about other people.
Or the common good. The one that really gets me, not just the voting, the voter, all the obstacles to voting, but the book banning.
Sure.
The fascism that has creeped into our politics.
Absolutely. Right. And the destruction of democracy in little pieces, a bite here, a bite there, until you normalize tyranny. And that's what's really scary, that we're heading in a direction that we really need to reverse course on. And it's not just a party thing. It's a human thing that, we've got to rethink what we're doing to this country. And we've got to get back to our best and our brightest, creating the kinds of policies that everybody can be nurtured for and can be elevated to the highest that they can reach.
I want to hear your thoughts on what's at stake this November. You mentioned tyranny. It sounds pretty good.
I think so. I think democracy is at stake. I think that, like I say, we need to look at where this country is going and where people are taking it to. So what's at stake is that we need to right the course. We need to make sure that the folks that are at the very top of government will create the kinds of policies that really are just, that really give freedom, not take freedom away, that really look at what the Constitution said, what our moral ideas were, and live their lives in a way that they are a model for the good things in life. I don't mean money. I mean the moral character of America needs to be resurrected, I think. And I think that's part of what is at stake. Now, I don't think that any one party has always got that moral, stance. But I will say that this is a difficult election, I know, for many folks, because things like immigration, I think both parties have often used that as a point to make people afraid. And that bothers me to no end. That should not be the case. If you are a Christian or of any religion, but for sure when you call yourself a Christian, we're taught that you give succor to the immigrant. You are welcoming. You are helpful. Not that you put up wires and shoot plastic bullets or whatever kind. Not that you hope to drown children. That's all got to change.
It says something so scary about our society.
Yes.
It's frightening to me. Rosie, you're always asked to talk about issues and policy. Although I did ask about poetry, so yes. I feel that's a win. But I'd love for you to talk about your family. How is everybody?
Fine, thank you. We're very fortunate. Joaquin has been doing very well. He keeps up with things that he has to do medical-wise, and he's been in very good shape. His children are doing well today. Roman, the second, his son, is in D.C. with him. So Roman is 8 years old, and he loves buildings. So D.C. is a great... Yes. We think he may be studying architecture one day, but he can tell you the height of buildings in Dubai and any place in the country. He has studied them. So they're doing very well. And, of course, the 2-year-old baby, Anna, is always a joy. I think she's going to be our elected official one day.
Oh, really?
She's the one, yeah.
Wow.
For sure. And then, of course, Andrea is an artist and does dancing and acting. And then, of course, Julian's kids, who are in Hawaii right now, are Karina, who's 15 and has done drama, is doing volleyball, doing very well in school, as well as Christian, whose one object right now is to meet Wimby. His whole life is he wants to play basketball with Wendy one day when he grows up.
And has he met him yet?
No.
Oh my God, we've got to make that
happen. But
we've got to make that happen, even if they meet at HEB, someplace.
Sure. I'm sure one day, hopefully,
it'll happen. It'll happen.
And Julian's doing well, commuting back and forth from California.
I'm trying to get him on this podcast too.
Oh, great. Yeah, I'm sure he will.
Thank you so much for being here, for existing.
Well, thank
for
you.
Giving us two incredible sons that are public servants in one way or another. And stay well.
Thank you. You too. And thank you for all you've done, and especially in the West Side, and for all the things that you do on the column. I always love reading them. And
Thank you.
Podcast.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Rosie, for being with us. I really appreciate it. You can watch the video version of Nosotros on YouTube and listen to it anywhere you get your podcast. My Metro column appears every Wednesday and Friday in the San Antonio Express News. My email address is eayala@express-news.net. Thanks for joining us. See you next time on Nosotros.